Welcome to the Oklahoma Railway Museum. Here, every whistle, every signal, and every movement tells the story of America's railroad heritage. But preserving that history takes more than operating historic equipment. It takes knowledge, it takes professionalism, and above all, it takes safety. Whether you are a seasoned conductor, an engineer, a brakeman, a flagger, or preparing for your very first day on the train crew, every volunteer shares one important responsibility: knowing and following the General Code of Operating Rules, or GCOR. GCOR isn't just another rule book. It's the common language that keeps railroad operations safe, efficient, and predictable. Every signal, every radio transmission, every movement of a train begins with a shared understanding of these operating rules. That's why annual GCOR training is required for every member of the Oklahoma Railway Museum train crew. During this course, we'll review the operating rules, discuss important safety practices, examine real-world situations, and refresh the knowledge needed to operate safely on our railroad. Remember, rules are written in ink, but safety is written by every member of the crew. So find a comfortable seat, open your rule book, and let's begin another year of safe railroad operations.
Okay, we're going to jump right off with our GCOR. If everybody will turn to 1.0, General Responsibilities. Safety is the most important element in performing duties. Obeying the rules is essential to job safety and continued employment. And I know we're all volunteers, but you don't follow the rules as volunteers, you can still be a volunteer. You just won't be part of the train crew. 1.1.1 is probably the most important thing you will see in this book. Maintaining a safe course. In case of doubt or uncertainty, take the safe course. Now, hopefully you all understand what the safe course is. If you don't understand, you probably need to just stop what you're doing until you get the proper direction and instruction, okay? Never just assume something is one way or another. If you don't know what is supposed to happen, stop, ask, okay? This is all real time. This equipment will kill you. It's hard. It will not give. Your body will definitely give first. So never put yourself in a position. Never do something unsafe. Never do something you're not sure about. Everybody get that? I'm going to beat that up all the time. I want to make sure that everybody does that. Now, yes, we could read down through here on everything. I'm just going to kind of skip through parts of this. 1.1.4 is condition of equipment and tools. We have a bunch of tools and things that were mostly donated to us. Some we've actually purchased because we didn't have the safe or proper tools. And that also is your cars and your equipment. Those are tools we use out here at the museum. So safety inspections and such are very important, regardless if you're just digging a hole with a shovel. You don't want to use a broken handle, swinging a spike ball with a broken handle. So always inspect your equipment, smallest hand tool to the biggest locomotive. 1.3.1, rules, regulations, and instruction. Now this is something a lot of people haven't quite understood, and I want to make sure everybody's clear on this. Your GCOR book is something you have to have with you while you're in service. Now, we have tried to put some of these copies in the cabs, in the locomotives. We used to have some in the cabooses, but you need to make sure wherever you're stationed that you do have a copy of the GCOR, whether it's your own personal copy or a museum copy that is placed in that particular car. So, somebody, whoever that conductor or brakeman is, will need to have a copy of GCOR. Down at the very bottom, we've got issued, canceled, or modified. You see that little section? And it's under general orders, yes. Rules may be issued, canceled, or modified by a track bulletin, general order, or special instruction. Okay? We have a spot for all that information right there where the sign-in log is for hours of service, okay? You are supposed to be checking those every time you come out and sign in as an hours of service crew member. They can change. Now, the odds are something changed without you all knowing it are very slim, but it has happened. So you should be reviewing those, make sure you know what they are, where they are, and what information they contain, okay? General orders, are numbered consecutively, are issued and canceled by a designated manager, contain only information and instructions related to the rules or operating practices. They replace any rule, special instruction, or regulation that conflicts with general order, okay? Not a hard one to understand.
And those are right there where the crew sign-in is, by the way, if anybody doesn't know. Right there where you sign in as crew member, just to the left, there's 2 clipboards there.
All right, we're going to skip over to Hours of Service Law 1.17. Employees must be familiar and comply with the requirements of the Federal Hours of Service Law. Employees are expected to use off time so they're prepared for work. Well, we're not employees, volunteers, but we do fall under that Hours of Service Law. You cannot work more than 12 hours. For some reason, should that occur, you can work long enough to get your train off of the main track and secured, but must do so quickly, or you need to do so prior to, if at all possible. You're also supposed to have 10 hours of uninterrupted rest between your next assignment. So if you worked out here till 10 o'clock at night, you need to have 10 hours of rest, which then puts you at 8 o'clock in the morning as your next available time to volunteer on hours of service. So just think about it. If you've worked your 12 hours, you need to make sure you've had 10 hours off, okay? We have run into circumstances to where that does come into play, especially during polar. It can catch you very, very, very quickly. Yeah, movie shoots, there's a lot of different things. Inspection of freight cars. That's 1.33. When personnel are not on duty primarily to inspect freight cars, each car placed in the train may be moved after it has received a safety inspection as follows. Cars must be checked for leaning, sagging, improper position on truck, objects hanging or dragging from the car or extended from the sides, insecurely attached doors, broken or missing safety appliances, content leaks from placards of hazardous material cars, which thank goodness we don't deal with, insecure coupling devices, overheated wheel or journal, broken or cracked wheel, brake that fails to release, staff type brake not in the fully raised position, any apparent hazard that could cause an accident. So those are just what they say, but it's all inclusive. Anything and everything humanly possible on that car you look at. Could a car be sagging? Yes, it could be in the middle. Could we have something offset and the car be slightly tilted? Yes, it could. Do we have flat cars we use? Yes. Is the staff brake fully raised? You need to make sure of that, because you can lower them for loading equipment and doing other things. People get out here and play with stuff. It's not just volunteers. We have lots of guests who think they want to tinker with, touch, and play with everything we own out here. So you have to be very careful and watch, because that's something the real railroads don't have quite the same problem with, that people can get up and physically touch their stuff. They shouldn't be. It doesn't mean they don't, but here people do that. So you've got to look for all those things that could happen to your car. You do not want to have a failure out there on something that you could have prevented by catching it while you're doing your car inspections. And this all just says freight cars, but this also goes for your passenger equipment. There's nothing different. It's a car. Are things broken, loose, and hanging? Do you see issues? Look at your couplings. Look under. Make sure every valve is turned the correct way. You'll find out on your terminal if it's not, but there's a lot of things you can do on inspection first off that are going to save you time later down the road. Okay? All right. Now, let's see. We're going to go to 1.41 on the next page. Engines coupled to occupied passenger cars. Engines coupled to equipment that includes occupied passenger cars must not be left without an authorized employee in charge. Okay? Now, when we're stopped out here, there's no visitors on our train. No, we still need to secure that cab, but you don't have to have somebody up there full time. Now, when you're starting to run trains, yes, we'll have volunteers on the trains. We'll have visitors looking at stuff. Somebody needs to be in charge of that locomotive. It does not necessarily have to be the engineer. It doesn't necessarily have to be the conductor. The authorized person is any person that is knowledgeable and able to watch the locomotive, deal with any minor malfunctions that might occur, or if you're seeing something leak, you're hearing noises, you can then radio and deal with it. It just has to be somebody who is knowledgeable and understands. So it's not always the engineer, it's not always the conductor, but y'all need to help each other and take care of each other, because it gets old up there in the cab. Those cabs are hot. They're not air conditioned yet. Probably never will be. So it is very important you do not leave a standing train just unoccupied from the cab. Let's see.
2.17.
I'm not going to go through all this one, but on the next page, duties of the crew, there's conductor's responsibilities, engineer responsibilities, and all crew member responsibility. I'm not going to go through that verbatim, but you all need to read that and understand it. It's everybody's responsibility in the end to make sure everything is operated and maintained safely. But when it comes to train time, the conductor is the final voice, okay? The engineer, he just works on signals. He goes when you say go. He stops when you say stop. Unless there's an emergency, anybody can stop that train, okay? All right, next one, we're gonna go to radio rules.
Before you,
Yep.
when
Go ahead.
and anybody touching off of what he said, anybody can stop the train. When you guys, if anybody is on the ground and you use the radio to stop the train, give a description of why you are stopping as quickly as possible as well, because that lets the engineer know if he needs to dump it or if he's got 10 feet to slow it down nice and easy.
That does make a difference. Good point. All right, radio communication, transmitting. Before transmitting, you have to listen long enough to make sure the channel is not being used. Give required identification and not proceed with further transmission until acknowledgement is received. Now, I've always thought this was kind of strange the way they did this, but to me, the first thing in the rules is you check that radio to just make sure it even works. That should have been rule number one, test the radio. Why they didn't do that is kind of beyond me. It's on further back at 2.17. I find that kind of funny in a roundabout way. All right, mobile units, you give the name and initial of the railroad. Train name, which is usually the engine number out here, is what you use to identify a precise mobile unit, okay? So we have been doing lots more multiple locomotive operations out here. So it is imperative that you do identify yourself with what crew you are working on. If you're working with crew 48, you say conductor 48 to engineer 48. You want to make sure that that communication is directed to whom you want it to have it. The other crews need to be mindful if they're hearing that radio communication is also not to interrupt. That goes back up there to make sure the channel is not being used. That's your very first part. 2.4, if you're expecting a response, you say over. If you are not expecting a response and that is the end of the communications, it is out. So if I'm talking to engine 48, it's conductor 48, engineer 48, over. I'm expecting to hear something back from that engineer. When that engineer replies back to me, I'll acknowledge his conversation and I'll be going by conductor 48 out. That way, anybody else listening for that other train crew, they know our talk is done. they can then proceed with their information. Now, we have a lot of problems, and I still am going to figure out a way to work this out during operations where we have radios out for all of our ground crews. We have them for parking lots, this and that and the other, and we get a lot of talk where we shouldn't have it. So we do have 2 channels, and I'm going to work on getting those people who are not directly involved in train operations on a different channel. We're having too much walkover on that. All our flagmen should be on the same channel because those flagmen need to let us know that it is clear to proceed through that crossing, okay?
Or why they're stopping.
Or why they're stopping you, yes, because that flagman at that crossing he's your boss at that point. You can't proceed without his authorization, okay? It talks about that. We'll get to that later on down the road, but flagmen should be letting the crew know that it is safe to proceed. It can be a wave of the arm, it can be a radio transmission, but it just has to be seen and acknowledged. 2.6, communication not understood or incomplete. An employee who does not understand a radio communication or who receives a communication that is incomplete must not act upon the communication and must treat it as if it was not sent. That goes back to your very first rule. If you don't know what to do, stop, okay? Acknowledgement. An employee receiving a call must acknowledge the call immediately unless doing so would interfere with safety. Now, there are times the conductor will be calling that engineer. He's got his hands on brakes. He's got his hands on whistles. He is busy up in that cab. He may not be able to immediately reply to you. So you have to give time sometimes. But if you do not get a response after a short amount of time, you should repeat that. Emergency calls, 2.10. This is one that we've talked about, our safety briefings with our car hosts. If there is an emergency, it is 3 times emergency, 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 and state clearly what that is. It may be a time that you're very excited about what's happening, but do your very best to remain calm and explain what that emergency is, because if we have to ask for a reply, repeat, that could take longer for us. Do we need to be stopping? Do we have a personal injury? We need to understand what, as a crew, is happening. So regardless of whether you're the conductor, the engineer, brakeman, or just one of your ground men, you need to state what that emergency is. Now, if you see a train derailing or something, that's stop. That's an emergency, but you need to say stop, okay? And if you say stop 3 times frantically, that engineer is going to put it to a stop.
Oh, yeah.
It may not be the smoothest stop, but he's going to bring that to a stop. And that's exactly what we want. We also have had a little bit more radio use that's inappropriate, okay? So we need to watch what we do on the radios, all right? I know we get bored. We need to keep ourselves awake and have a good time, but other people are listening. So we've got to be careful what we use the radio for and what we're saying, all right? 2.11, yes.
Try to keep it clean.
Yeah, that's
There's
the
one
best
thing,
answer.
if you got to stay awake and you're having a conversation with your conductor, just keep it clean. And I know I'm one of the ones that's guilty of pushing the limits on that, but
yeah, that's under as Guy said, 2.11, prohibited transmission. And here's where 2.17. Why this is not first, like I said, it always amazed me. But test radios. You need to test it as soon as possible before beginning your assignment. So why wouldn't you do that first? Why would you go about your business, start checking things, and not have checked your radio to make sure it works? You want to do that if you're near the depot. That way you can replace your radio with another one if one's out of service. Just verify that things are working, okay? That's not hard at all. All right, let's see here. We've covered.
Hey, Greg,
Yes.
on the, I'm trying to train, we had a guy had that.
Yes.
And I think John was marking that, but down around the 23rd Street Bridge, So we got 30th Street, and it's okay to use that, because it doesn't say anything about.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All right.
I
'Cause we
mean-
carry a lot of old people.
Yeah, we have people that are probably would otherwise not ever get on a train, okay? And we want those folks to have a good time, but we have to also understand there are problems and they do happen. And we have had that issue before. So yeah, it's just listen. If you're walking the train, visiting with folks, make sure everybody's having a good time and just they're okay. Well-being is very important. On electronic devices 2.21, guess what? You're not supposed to use those. Now, we can authorize the use of those. So, for use as timing devices and other things, we can use them because it is an authorized piece of equipment by the railroad at that point, okay? It's not up there for pleasure. It's not up there for watching video games. It would be used for a specific function, okay? And yes, we do use them for timers. We're watching time. You can also, since we don't have speedometers in the locomotive, you can run speed on that. You can catch what your speed is actually going. So there are times that we will authorize the use of an electronic device, but understand and read through this. They're not to be used for anything other than railroad approved uses, okay? Period. No gaming, no this, that, or the other.
Does that count if we have like digital versions of GCOR on our phone, for example? Is that allowed to do that?
They are starting to allow electronic logbooks in GCOR books.
On tablets.
Yep, on a tablet.
And the railroad has actually started providing, in some instances, tablets for that very reason. So here, yes, but not out in the real world yet, okay? But hopefully we'll have a hard copy that's accessible, all members of the train crew on one of the cars, or like I said, that's our goal. All right, let's go to 4.2. Timetables. Now, I'll actually just back up a minute. We are going to have new timetables come out, obviously. If our current timetable is extremely dated, so updates will be made, and we will be issuing a new timetable sometime this operating season. So, we will have notice put out 24 hours beforehand. There'll be a general order made, which will go in the folder in there. And we'll also make sure sufficient copies are available for all the crews to get their copy, okay? That part generally won't affect you that much unless it happens to be on a run day, but I'll time it to where that doesn't happen. So you'll still have the general order and new timetables will be handed out. The old ones will be discarded. 4.2, special instructions. Special instructions will replace any rule or regulation with which they conflict. That always kind of tossed me at first, but signals and their use, 5.0. Most important, 5.2, the very last one. Not act on any signal that they do not understand. And it goes back with all the communications and your operating practices. Safety. If you don't understand, don't do it. Don't move. Get clarification, okay? And it's always, the other parts are just as important. Be on the lookout for those signals. If you're a ground man, you may have a conductor you're working with. You may be watching for that flagman. He may be waving you down, stopping you, that there's a problem at the crossing. So you always need to be vigilant for that. And then comply with those signals. Engineer is really probably the most important one on that, is he is going to be watching for those signals and then complying with those. You need to be very clear and visually there where he can see you. If he can't see you, it'll be on the radio, but there's a lot of things that go into that communication. 5.3 shows your standard basic hand signals, okay? We all have slightly different ways that we do the same thing.
That's
It's
an abbreviated list.
Yeah, a very abbreviated list. Anything you do when you're making hand signals, and I'm not talking about with a lantern. Lantern at night work is very, very particular, and you have to be extremely careful. But regular hand signals, if you're not using radio communication and you are visually going back and forth with each other, you need to stand in that position where that engineer can see you if that's your desired use. That may mean you're standing 10 or 15 feet away from where you're at just in order for that engineer to have the clear view of sight of you, okay? You want to make sure he can see you. If you can't see him, he can't see you.
Conversely, when somebody disappears from an engineer, the engineer will stop, guarantee it.
Now, those signals need to be exaggerated. When you're telling somebody to come to you, you don't want to just sit here in these little tiny movements. That engineer may be 5, 6 cars back, okay? You need to be exaggerated in all of your movements, okay? Make sure that they're clear and can be understood. All right, and that goes to 5.3.2. When you're giving signals, make sure they can be plainly seen. Give very clearly so they can be understood. And on the engineer's side, if at all possible. Now, that's not always possible, and that's where you're going to be on radio communications, okay? But if at all possible, be on the engineer's side. If a signal disappears, stop the movement. If you're on the ground and he is expecting you on the ground and he can't see you, that engineer is going to stop, okay? Period. And we will do it, and that has been done, and it'll be done again in the future, I promise you. 5.3.7, radio responses. When radio communication is used to make a movement, crews must respond to specific instructions given for each movement. Radio communications for shoving movements must specify the direction and distance, and must be acknowledged when distance is more than 4 cars. Okay, does everybody understand that? It'll show it talking here later, but distance is measured by a standard 50-foot increment. And that was from the old 50-foot box cars, and to this day, they still have 50-foot increments, okay? So, your idea of 50-foot, my idea of 50-foot are so different. Everybody I've worked with out here, it's really funny. I've seen some 50-foot that's more like 20. I've seen some 50-foot that look more like 200. So do your best to give an accurate description of how far. You can look at a rail joint. Ours are 31 foot. So it's almost 2 rail joints. Just short of 2 rail joints is 50 foot. So you can look at some rail joints out here and kind of get an idea. But again, 50 foot is your standard. You need to make sure you say what direction and how far, okay? That engineer should not move, better not move, unless he knows that. Now, if you're on hand signals, it's a different story. Direction is based off the locomotive F. That F could be pointed either north or south here on our railroad. So you can have a shove move with the locomotive facing forward. So it'll be a shove ahead. So many cars, and you'll have that direction because you're shoving ahead. Ahead being the F part of that locomotive, okay? You just got to make sure you know which way your locomotive's facing. I've gotten confused out here, done totally opposite myself. So I promise you, it's easy to do. So, and again, that engineer, if he doesn't quite understand, you're telling him to shove back and it's really going ahead, he's going to probably stop and not do anything. All right, and then the engineer is going to stop within half of that distance unless additional instruction is received. Now, that goes back to that brakeman conductor. If you don't tell that engineer if you gave him a 20 car clearance, if at 10 cars you're not telling him you have 20 more cars, guess what? He'll bring it to a stop. So half that distance you give to that engineer, you also need to be giving yourself the mental note. I need to give in half that distance a repeat, okay? You'll hear that a lot on the radio. It's like so many cars. It's like, wow, they just called that out. That is why, because you have to let that engineer know within half that distance, okay? Oh, 5.4.7, display of red flag or a red light on the end of your train. We need to make sure that a red flag is placed during daylight on the back of the car. Now, even though not all cars have lights, we do have cars that with lights on the end. You need to also, during your inspection, make sure your red light is working if that isn't the case, and then turn it on your movement down. On your shove move back, it's not necessary, but you still have to keep a red flag at that back end to show the end of the train, okay? Everybody understand that? I don't think that's right.
There's that, the red flag.
This is 5.10 markers. A marker of the prescribed type must be displayed on the trailing end of the car to indicate the rear end of the train. That goes along with what we just talked about. That shows your end of train. We're going next to the blue signal protection of workmen, 5.13. We could spend the entire day on this one, okay? This is a no joke.
And it's very important.
Yes. Now, while I'm not going to spend an extreme amount of time, this is a section I want everybody to make sure they've read, they understand. If there's questions, they can get with it. But, this is verbatim. The rule outlines the requirements for protecting railroad workmen who are inspecting, testing, repairing, and servicing rolling equipment. In particular, because these tasks require the workmen to work on, under, or between rolling equipment, workmen are exposed to potential injury from moving equipment. Take that to heart, because every one of you at some point will be that workman, okay? Railroad employees assigned to inspect, test, repair, or service railroad rolling equipment or components, including brake systems. Train and yard crews are excluded except when they perform the above work on rolling equipment not part of the train or yard movement they are handling or will handle. Now, does that make sense? Does everybody understand? If you're working as part of that train crew, you're not going to have that blue flag protection because you're that crew. You're talking to your crewmen, so they are aware of that. It's the person that's not part of that crew that, hey, I need to go work on this piece of equipment because y'all can't. That's when blue flag protection comes into play. That is for your safety, because the engineer is not going to be able to go if you've got the blue flag placed on that control stand, okay? He's not going to touch it. He can't touch it. And we'll get more in there on, go ahead.
The blue flag can be a flashing light. It could be a magnetic sign stuck to the side of the locomotive on the coupler. It could be, It could be a blue handkerchief set over the control stand. It could even be a blue reverser shoved in the reverser spot. So there's multiple kinds of blue flags that can be placed. It can be a blue flag on the rail.
Yes, in the knuckle, everywhere.
We've got 3 of them parked in the shop right now.
Yes. It's any rolling equipment that's not past that blue signal, ever, okay? What a blue signal signifies. Everybody clear on that? A blue signal signifies that workmen are on, under, or between rolling equipment, and that requires the below, okay? Rolling equipment must not be moved or coupled. It must not pass a blue signal. That is very important, guys. And while there are ways that, the train crew works that doesn't require that blue signal, if you're with a craft other than with that train, we have to mark the front and back of that train, both ends. The conductor's got to know, the engineer has got to know. So while it does take time, unfortunately, yes, you need to place those blue signals so that the engineer is well understood. And around here, I also like to see that you notify that engineer, because the engineer may be out of the cab. That train may not be occupied at this time. There may be a cut of cars that doesn't require the engineer to be in that cab. Or the engineer stepped out and a qualified person has been left there. Placing that blue flag, if qualified person does not convey that to the engineer when the engineer comes back and there's not a blue flag, it just says we're under blue flag protection. Oh, wow. He might hop up in that cab and say, I don't see anything, and leave, and somebody's trapped, okay? Those situations can happen, and that's why this is put in here. So always make sure that that is marked. On the next flip side of that, number 4 there, rolling equipment must not enter a track when a blue signal is displayed at the entrance to the track. Now, we haven't done this in a while, but yes, we can blue flag a whole section of track leading down into the shop area, the yard, the rip track. You can set up a blue flag in that area that protects everything in there. That doesn't mean you can't have additional blue flags, because John may have a piece of equipment he's working on, Guy has a piece of equipment he's working on, but there's an open track up the middle. You can't couple up to his, you can't couple up to his, but with permission you can get the blue flag removed and use the empty track. So there's times that could happen. Protection removed. Now this one is very, very important. Blue signals may be removed only by the craft or group who placed them. So again, we're going to go back to that guy placed a blue flag on something, John placed a blue flag on something. You can't couple up to move without talking with that particular person in this instance, okay? I don't know why John blue flagged it, but he did. That means we shouldn't move it. Guy did the same thing, but I can talk to Guy and say, hey Guy, I need to move this piece of equipment. Do I have permission? And he can tell me yes or no. And with that permission, then it could be removed if he is not available, okay? But you can't just randomly hook up to anything if it has that blue flag on it. Now, there may be a group of people who are working on it, and this group may include Eric, Paul, and Guy. And they're all together on what's going on, and any one of that group can say, yes, it's okay to remove, because they're part of a group and craft. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand that? So it's not just necessarily one person, it can be a member of that group. All right? Very important. Don't just go pulling. 6.2, initiating a movement. Before initiating a movement on a main track, a crew member must receive a track warrant or general track bulletin. Now, you notice it says on the main track. If we're making a yard move and things like that and not out on main 1 or main 2, a track warrant isn't required. But if you are going beyond those points and out on main 1 or main 2, switching and doing things, a track warrant will be required from the dispatcher, okay? Very, very important. 6.3, main track authorization. Now, this is another one of those that everybody needs to remember. We are working under Rule 6.14, restricted limits. Beat that one into your head, okay? That is very important to remember, very important to know, because there are different authorizations for main track, but we use only 6.14 restricted limits on our railroad. 6.4, reverse movements. Do we make reverse movements here at the museum?
Oh, yeah.
Well, not really. We're doing shove movements, but we're not doing reverse movements. There is a difference, okay? Because we are using 6.14 restricted, that changes everything, okay? 6.4 is not used in this particular instant. I know that sounds weird. It's like, well, we do reverse movements all the time. Well, no, they're talking about a reverse movement in a traffic control situation. We're not signalized. We're not doing any of that. We are in restricted limits, so there is not a technical reverse move. It is always going to be a shove move. The next one we're going to is 6.5 on the next page. Shove movements. Well, suddenly, all right, since we don't do reverse movements, here's all your rules for shoving movements. Cars or engines must not be shoved until the engineer knows who is protecting the movement and how the protection will be provided. The employee providing protection for the movement shall not engage in any task unrelated to that movement. So, when you understand, since we're under restricted 6.14, everything is a shove movement. So this gets back to which way is your locomotive facing. So you're going to know if it's a shove ahead, shove back, and you're still going to have to say, hey, conductor 48, engine 48, shove ahead, and then you'll give the car count and all that. And you need to be the one, he needs to know where you're at, how you're providing this protection, okay? When we're doing our normal train rides, you're protecting from the rear of the train on that shove movement. So you'll let the engineer know that conductor is providing this protection. It may be the conductor is doing other things and he's got his brakeman doing the protection, okay? So somebody has to be in charge of that move. And that's all they're doing. They're not visiting with passengers. They're not doing anything else. They're protecting that move, okay? When cars or engines are shoved, crew members must be positioned to provide visual protection, okay? And again, you're going to be at the end of the car. You're going to be watching what you're shoving against. If it's during polar, you might be sitting in the cab of the locomotive on the other end. You're still going to be providing that protection from that point and watching what you're doing, okay? It doesn't matter what kind of a piece of equipment, whether it be a passenger car, an inspection car, riding on a flat car, you still have to give that protection. All right, and then again, it's the same thing we've got to have. You got a direction will be described in the relationship to the front of the controlling locomotive F stencil. We've already touched on that, but here it is in print. You got to know which way that locomotive's pointing. And if you don't know, ask your engineer, okay? It's all right. If you don't know, the safe course is ask, okay? Always. All right, and then, instruct the engineer to the locomotive using ahead. Instruct locomotive engineer to go backward, you go back up. To instruct the engineer to stop, of course, stop. Communicating in distances using 50 foot as the standard for one car length. There we go again. This is back to how far, okay? Do your best to figure out what that 50 foot is in your eyes looking down the track. It's very difficult to look down a straight piece of track and know how many cars can I really see. It really is difficult. Engineer must acknowledge that distance when more than 4 cars. So as you're doing your shove move going to 50th, you give him 30 cars, he needs to repeat 30 cars. You make sure he said 30 cars, because we have had issues before where the communication wasn't clear and the wrong number came back. So make sure, if you're the one calling out that car count, that the engineer correctly gives you back the read, okay? Engineer needs to do that. Now, when it's less than 4 cars, that's usually going to be working in the yard, doing a coupling move, and he can't do radio, brakes, throttle all at the same time, okay? So that's why when it says 4 cars or more, he's not going to be as busy. If it's less than 4 cars, you're coming to a joint most likely, or to a stop at a bumper post or something. He can't talk on that radio, okay? That doesn't mean you stop giving instruction. You keep giving 3 cars, 2 cars, 1 car, half a car, 10 feet stop. He doesn't have to reply, but you are still required to give the information, okay? Are everybody clear on that? Really? Everybody? Everybody? All right. Let's see. Let's go to 6.14. This is restricted limits. Between designated points specified by signs and in special instruction, trains and engines are authorized to use main track that not protect against other trains or engines, only after obtaining a track warrant, listing all track bulletins that affect their movement. All movements must be made at restricted speed. So restricted limits, restricted speed. Restricted speed is being able to stop within half the distance, okay? So if you're an engineer and you don't think you can stop in half the distance of that 10 car count, you better slow down. It's not up to the conductor to do it. That's your job as the engineer, okay?
Is there an upper limit on how fast
Well, if you look at our timetable, we have a 10-mile-an-hour maximum speed on our railroad. So you have to be able to, if you're running at 10 miles an hour, you have to be able to stop within half a distance at 10 miles an hour for whatever that distance given to you is. So if it's 50 cars, you've got to be able to stop in 25 cars, basically. So 10 miles an hour can be pretty quick if you've got a big string of cars and a lot of weight on you. It doesn't stop on a dime, guys. They just don't do it. It's just like you see all these accidents on crossings on railroads and stuff. You don't have to be going fast to not be able to stop. I mean, they do not stop on a dime. I don't care if it's a light locomotive. You're going to slide. You're not, even if you locked up all your brakes, you're not stopping. It's going to take time. Now, 6.27, movement at restricted speed. When required to move at restricted speed, movement must be made at a speed that allows stopping within half the range of vision. Okay, what did we just talk about? Well, here it is spelled out in GCOR. This is the rule. You've got to be able to stop within half that distance. And they give a list of things that could be stopped short of, but I mean, you better be watching for broken rails, all kinds of things out here on our railroad. We had that occurrence. We had a rail break. But, this is all reasons. Now, they're saying, restricted speed, trains are not to exceed 20 miles an hour, but our railroad is 10, okay? The only times we have done over 10 are very specific for a very specific reason, and authority had to be granted to go beyond that 10 mile an hour, okay? Let's go to 7.9. Switching passenger or occupied outfit cars. Before switching passenger equipment or occupied outfit cars, couple the air hoses, fully charge the brake system, use the automatic brake valve when switching. Now, everybody has been out here as we're switching passenger cars. We always make sure that we have air on those cars. And why? Because of Rule 7.9 here. The only time a car cannot be moved under air is if it is a maintenance move. And that won't be on a train. It will be from wherever its current location is, possibly into the shop for maintenance. But other than that, you better have all your air on those cars, and you need to fully charge the system. And it does not charge in 30 seconds, okay? It takes 8 minutes. So couple up, get your air on as quickly as possible, and then do a set and release. You can always make sure that that car is working, okay? Let's see. Now we're going to take a big jump up to 14.1. This section is the rules and applications and track warrant control. In 14.1, authority enter TWC limits. It's where designated by the timetable, a track warrant will authorize main track use under the direction of the dispatcher or as prescribed. And we're under rule, what? Anybody?
6.14.
There you go. Restricted limits, okay? And if you look at that example they give you there, ours is a little bit different, but there are boxes there to check for track bulletins in effect. So if there's something up, your track warrant will give you the information required, okay? That is why this is required. Now, remember, this is not like yard movements. This is if we're out on main 1 and main 2 doing stuff, okay? And does everybody understand the two main tracks out here? What they are? The main line is the track that runs through the property. The main 2 is the track that is adjacent to the depot and the canopy. Now, we're going to go to 15.2.1. And before I do that, there's a 15.2 protection by track bulletin form B. Now, while it'll be very rare that we will actually have train movements out there if a form B is out, okay? It is possible to run trains on a form B with the roadmaster's authority to do so. But I really want to go to the 15.2 1. Track bulletin Form B may be used to protect on-track equipment such as rail detector cars without using yellow, red flags. Identify protected equipment in the track bulletin. So if we have, for some reason, a need to have a train out and there's a crew out working, on your bulletin, there'll be a, do not pass this point, or stop short of this point, get permission to pass, okay? So it's possible, but highly unlikely we would do this, because if we had a train out and a Form B out, we would probably be a maintenance train attached with the Form B, okay? But this is how, if we needed to run a train and have work people out, the Form B covers those workmen. This is how we can operate on the track with that Form B and get by. The railroads use these all the time out there in the real world. There's maintenance going somewhere all the time, almost 24 hours a day. So you can't just block that track, but the people who are working on that track can clear away from it. And if it is safe to cross that section of track, the foreman can talk to the train crew and give permission to enter their Form B in certain limits, okay? And at a speed that is most likely restricted, okay?
The only person that can grant you authority under Track B or under a Form B is Mr. Eric.
He is our roadmaster. Which,
So if you have a problem,
it ends up between the dispatcher and the roadmaster is what it comes down to, okay?
Which who dictates all trains and movements.
Yeah. And then the train master can authorize the movements out on Main 1 and 2. And guess what? That's all we're going to cover in that section. We are going to go to the air brake and train handling. Air brake tests and inspections, compliance with the FRA regulation. Inspect and test brake equipment on locomotives and cars according to the Federal Railroad Administration regulations contained within these rules. In addition, all cars at the initial terminal or that they are added en route must be given a safety inspection as per Rule 1.33 in the General Code of Operating Rules, GCOR. All cars, okay? And if we pick up a car, it should be tested as well, or shall be tested, not should be, shall be tested. We might come out of here with a couple of cars, go to 50th and pick up more cars. We can't just leave 50th with those cars without doing a safety inspection, okay? You've got to test it. Inspections and air brake tests may be performed by either a qualified person or a qualified mechanical inspector. A qualified person refers to a trainman given fundamental training on freight cars inspections and air brake tests. And a qualified mechanical inspector refers to a person such as a carman who has been given more extensive training that provides for a more detailed inspection. All trainmen are qualified persons in the application of the following rules. Okay? So that means if you are the engineer, you probably wouldn't be doing it because you've got your own things you're going to be handling. But if you're the conductor or brakeman, you should have all of the basic knowledge or are learning it, and you're shadowing somebody with the knowledge on how to do the test and inspect the equipment, okay? All cars of a train at a terminal, at the initial terminal, or cars that are added en route must be given a full safety inspection. Is that true or false, guys? Do you have to do that? Okay, remember that. We've stopped people before. Engineers have said, hey, not moving. You've coupled up and we're leaving with these. I'm not going to take them until you've done that inspection because, oh, wow. Let's say you have a coupler separate and the cars you picked up are the last ones and we're coming up grade out of 50th Street. If you have not done your test, you have not checked that brake equipment, and you don't have air, and that car comes loose, it's freewheeling until it hits something at the other end. So that's why you test those. Okay? All right. 100.4. Operative brakes. These requirements apply to air brake test and inspection. Unless the brake fails en route, the air brakes on all cars must be operative unless being moved for repairs and they are properly tagged. Okay, does everybody understand that? And we've had failures before en route, but in general, it better work before it leaves here, okay?
Case in point, when we have the brake froze on the
On the
one of
one,
our passengers.
yes. So everybody understands, all cars must be operative. Then, we'll kind of skip a little bit to the bottom, and I mean, everybody needs to read all this, and this is not why we're here, is for me to read the book to you. You all need to be very familiar with everything. At least 95% of the cars in the train must have operative brakes under all circumstances. Well, now how is that possible? If I just said that, all cars must be working, but I only have to have 95%. Well, you could have that failure en route, or you could have a car tagged out, specifically going for repairs, okay? But you can't have so many cars that are going for repairs without air brakes on them that you surpass not having 95% of your train under air, okay? That's kind of one of those exceptions to the rules, but the likelihood of it really happening here, probably not. 'Cause we're not going to move things on our grade that don't have brakes. We do not want to lose anything whatsoever. All right, 100.6 is the standard brake pipe pressure. Regulating valve must be set as follows. Yard and freight service, 80 psi. And for passenger equipment, we are also doing 80 psi. That is what we use here. Let's see. 100.8.1, not used, says there, but we're going right below it to the .1, air brake test using handheld gauges. We actually have some handheld gauges, okay? Handheld gauges used for brake test purposes must be determined to be accurate within the last 92 days. A method for checking the accuracy of the handheld gauge is outlined below. Now, I'm not going to read through this completely, okay? But there's a place to write on there when you've checked it, okay? And then it outlines on here the steps, and one important factor, the gauge has to be within 3 psi of the locomotive pipe gauge reading. If it's more than that, it can't be used, okay? So check the gauge. If it's out of date, follow procedure, get the gauge checked, then you can put the gauge on the end of the train as long as it meets the 3 psi. And there's even the note down there at the bottom, if it doesn't, that cannot be used, okay? Call that out already. We're going to that. All right, we're going to 100.9 and 100.10. This is the outline on how to do brake pipe leakage test. We're going to go down here to C, the brake pipe leakage method. 1, you charge the brake system within 15 psi of the regulating valve as set indicated by a gauge or device on the rear of the train. Wait for the signal to apply brakes. When you receive the signal, reduce brake pressure by 20 psi. Now this is for the engineers, by the way, but the conductor also needs to understand what the test is all about, because if you don't follow and you're saying, well, give me a release. Well, you can't get a set and expect him to give you the release because there's time you have to do. There's steps. So once you've given the 20 psi, you allow the brake pipe to exhaust. You wait 1 minute, cut out the automatic brake valve, wait an additional 1 minute for the brake pipe, pressurize and equalize. Then time the brake pipe leakage for 1 minute. If the leakage does not exceed 5 psi, very important, 5 psi, the test is complete. If the leakage exceeds 5 psi, the train must be inspected for leakage and retested. When you receive the signal to release the brakes, move the automatic brake valve to the release position and cut automatic brake valve in. Now this was for 26L. If I have, God, it's been too long. That's right, isn't it, Guy?
Yep.
Okay.
26.
All right. For 24, it's a little bit different.
For any other brake
Any
system
other
we've
brake
got
system.
out here.
Yeah. It's a little bit different. Steps 1 through 3 are the same, and then you lap and then wait 1 minute.
Then you go to
Then you go to the time. So there's a little difference there.
You don't have the equalization that you have to deal with.
Right. Now, those of you who are going to be becoming engineers, you'll get trained on this very intently, okay? Because getting this terminal test done correctly is very, very important. So, I don't expect you all to understand why on all this, and like I said, the 2 different brake systems we use here, but as a conductor or a brakeman, you've got to understand there are times that are going through in that cab, and you have to wait on that engineer to go through all these steps. Otherwise, he can't tell you what that leakage is on the train. So, 5 pounds maximum leakage you can have. Remember that. Very, very important. We got more than 5 pounds. We got a problem somewhere.
Yeah, you'll hear it.
Yeah. You haven't let the train charge long enough. Is a lot of people get up there and try to do a terminal way too quick. You know, 8 minutes is really kind of the minimum on a charge on these cars, okay?
Longer is better.
Longer is better. If you've got the time to get air on it and get it good, 15 or 20 minutes, you're better off. It does go down and give you the procedures for your terminal test and inspections, okay? You know, inspect before and during air brake test for the following. Inspect angle cocks and verify they're in the proper position. Inspect hoses to make sure they're connected and serviced properly. Look for leakage. Make necessary repairs to minimize leakage. And some of those leaks can be extremely difficult to hear. You know, the gaskets on those air hoses don't take much to bleed by, okay? And some of them you can really hear, some of them you can't. But the terminal test, it'll let you know if you've got a bad one in a hurry. Inspect retaining valves. They're in exhaust, which people better not mess with them here. And then I'm going to skip down a little bit. You know, this is back, conduct the test as follows. You know, this is charging the brake system. Then going through the leakage test, you know, with the 20-pound reduction, checking all cars, and that's both released and set, okay? And both sides of the train. It's not, oh, I can walk down and see everything from one side. Flat car, there's only one place you can check that flat car. There's a little opening in the flat cars that's about that big. And that's it. You have to be able to look in that slot to see if the piston is extended or not, or if it is retracted when it's released. So if you're walking down the platform side and you say you've checked all cars, I'm going to call foul immediately because I know you hadn't checked the flat car. Because guess what? It's on the other side. So yeah, you gotta look at both sides of that train, folks. And it's nice when you have 2 people because you can have one person running one side and one the other. That doesn't mean you have to do both sides as long as somebody on that crew is checking, okay? Again, read through this just so you understand it. I'm not going to really go over it in depth, but this is an important part just kind of for operations. All you new folks, we will work with you, and that is a good hands-on experience, okay? The book will tell you the basics. When you get out there and you're really doing it, that's when I think most people really learn and understand. All right, 101.2, locomotive daily inspections. Now, not everybody will be an engineer. Not everybody wants to be an engineer, but you will likely help that engineer at times with his inspection of that locomotive, checking sanders, lights, blower motors, on traction motors. You know, the engineer does not have to do it all by himself, and quite honestly, some of it's difficult to do by yourself. So I'm not going to go over all this in its entirety because there is a checklist in the locomotive cabs. There's your cab card that has to be checked and signed off on. There's your blue card that you have to look and make sure it is in date. Very important. That's the first thing that FRA will do. They're going to walk up into that locomotive. They're going to pull out that blue card. And they're going to look at it, make sure it is properly dated, checked, and signed by a qualified person, okay? Not everybody, and as a matter of fact, I don't want anybody in here touching those blue cards, with the exception of our mechanical folks, okay? Leave them alone. But you do need to make sure you know where they're at and what the dates are. One important thing to know is on the inspections of locomotives. If the locomotive cab card indicates a locomotive was inspected the previous calendar day, complete the current daily inspection before 23:59 hours. That ensures that the calendar inspection before the previous 23:59. Engineers that operate locomotives anytime after 1200 hours of the date must perform an inspection before completing his or her duty unless relieved by the proper authority or local instruction. So we don't run into that here. We've been out on overnight movie shoots before, but you know, that is kind of one of those odd deals that it is 23:59, not 2400, not 1200, not 0100. It's 23:59. All right, everybody, please get your timetables out. Timetable. Like I said, this poor thing is dated. Its effective date is Wednesday, March 1st, 2014. Okay? Always make sure, and I know this is, like I said, kind of an old date, make sure you've got the most up-to-date timetable. Yes, we are working off number 4, dated from 2014. All right. Maximum speeds. If you look in our timetable over on the first, if you open the inset page there, it says maximum speed permitted between milepost 337.3 to milepost 340.9, 10 miles per hour. Okay, now that goes for the entire railroad. Switches and other tracks, 5 miles an hour, but 5 miles an hour can be a little bit quick, even though that's the authorized speed going through switches. Guys, it's best to take your time. Ease through those switches. You don't want to put anything on the ground. You don't want to break a switch. So just
don't want to run through a bump post.
No bump post. We may have had that happen before, but you know. Excuse me.
They work. One of the few appliances.
All right, and if you also notice in here, we have our radio frequency, which is number 3, and it is the AAR channel 13 160.305. We also have a maintenance away channel, which is 160.815. AAR 47. That is the one that I'm really wanting to start getting other than train crew people to use, okay? We don't need the confusion and the problems, so we'll work on a method in which to make sure that happens, okay? The less we have out there on the channel, the better we are. Let's see. If you look through on all your general rules over here, you can see that some of them are definitely out of date. You know, we no longer have, you know, RS3 that, you know, handling cars on the east shop track due to curve. And then number 13, only one passenger car may be handled at a time. Those are now gone. You also know that we have some high equipment now too that won't fit under the canopy. So that will be inserted into this section, okay? That's where those go. Currently, you have the clipboards with all of our other information that you should be aware of, but some of that will be removed from that and put into the timetable when it is updated. I think. All right. This is all just basic information that you need to know, okay? Tells how switches and certain things should be left lines. It talks about your track warrants, it talks about use of main track. You know, it talks about you having their hours of service information, reporting of train movements, public road crossings, which are all DOT recognized. So they have placards on them that give the locations as to what the DOT crossing number is, okay? And you can see them all in there. And that also helps if there's been an incident or an accident. You can identify yourself by, hey, I'm at this crossing.
You're missing one.
Yeah, we're missing a second GART crossing. We're missing.
23rd Street.
Okay, but it's not placarded.
No.
It's, yeah, because it's an overhead, yeah, but it's not placarded. So you've got the public road crossings there, and they're listed by that. And if there's a problem, people will call in and say, hey, you have a problem with your flashing lights at DOT 413869Y. It's like, well, what the hell is that? Well, you whip your timetable out. It's like, oh, it's 36. So that is that. There's public considerations, public relations. It's basic information that we use. Obviously, our operating schedule is thoroughly changed, and that never did quite fit. The back cover gives you a basic layout of our railroad and where tracks are located. It's not perfect, but it's pretty decent consideration. It does not show all the yard tracks, and most timetables will not show all the yard tracks specifically on the overlay chart. Right. So we might do a expanded version of that at some point, add another page or two. If you go back towards the front of your timetable, there's the station names, which show your Intertrack, Adventure Station, Rose Rock, Oakwood, Awana, Eckroat, and Redboard with their mileposts. And then you've got restricted limits as you're operating. And you also have rule, and there's all those little numbers over there, and letters, I mean. So all those letters mean something, and they're over here on number 4 on the opposite side. They tell you what those mean. And the railroad was really good about this. So if there was a Y or a roundhouse, water facilities, radio facilities, operators, all that, that's where they would put in those designations. So Oakwood has a bunch of them, BKSW. So you've got general orders bulletins, standard clock. There's a siding, which is now actually main 2, and water. So just basic information to be familiar with for your railroad.